Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome back. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and this is what I call my morning musings. Boy, I tell you what, I woke up this morning feeling almost human again. It's absolutely amazing. As you can tell, I've still got a little bit of residual cough there, but overall, you know, it feels like the pneumonia is finally breaking up from me, and I'm actually feeling just pretty good. I appreciate all of the emails of concern, by the way, and your prayers. It means a great deal to me, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it. Well, we have begun an investigation of the doctrine of the already, but the already, but not yet. As I've suggested, and if scholars have recognized for century upon century, is that in the New Testament, we find the New Testament writers saying that something had already begun. Sometimes they even express it as a present reality. Later on, they will speak of that same identical doctrine, and they will say, it's yet future. Now, unfortunately, some have tried to say, well, that's true, but for instance, when it talks about salvation being real, that's spiritual salvation, and the salvation that was coming was physical salvation, etc., etc. We'll have more to say about that at the appropriate time. I don't believe that's a tenable view. I think that is absolutely refuted by the text itself. But again, we'll have more to say about that. Now, we took a look in our last segment at the doctrine of the kingdom. We saw how Jesus pronounced that the kingdom had drawn near. John the Baptizer announced, the kingdom of heaven is drawn near. Acts chapter 2, Christ had ascended and sat down at the right hand of the throne where he was ruling and reigning at that time, waiting until his enemies would be made his footstool, 1 Corinthians 15, in fulfillment of Psalms 110. And the time of the putting down of his enemies is the time of the entrance into the kingdom, 1 Corinthians 15, 50 and following. And that is shown to us in Revelation chapter 11, 15 and following, at the destruction of the old covenant city of Jerusalem, i.e. where the Lord was slain. It is said, now is come the salvation of our God. Now the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God. So we have here this ongoing process, this already but not yet of the kingdom, the initiation waiting for the consummation. Well, do you know what? The same is said of, for instance, the resurrection. Now, I know this is where a lot of folks just simply do not grasp. But let's go to 1 Corinthians 15 and take a look there. It is critical for us to understand Paul's use of imagery there. Paul says Christ is the first fruit of those who had already fallen asleep. Notice his term first fruit. Now look, it would have been absolutely impossible for any Jewish reader of that passage to read what Paul has to say, to read his reference there, and not think of the Jewish festal calendar. Because you see, they had what was known as the first fruit of the first fruit, and then the harvest. Paul says Christ was the first fruit. Now, he's technically the first fruit of the first fruit. But what do we find in the New Testament? Here is Christ, who is the first fruit. And then James could write, writing to the diaspora, and say, of his own will he begat us, according to the word of God, that we might be a kind of first fruits unto him. Romans chapter 8, Paul, anticipating the redemption of the body, the adoption, could say, we have received the first fruit of the Spirit. How could they receive the first fruit of the Spirit if they were not the first fruit? Well, Revelation chapter 7 and Revelation 14 depict to us the 144,000. Who are they? They are the first fruit. And Revelation 14 specifically identifies them as the firstborn of those redeemed to God from among men. And by the imagery, by the way, the imagery is directly taken from Israel's festal calendar, the Feast of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Harvest, which represented resurrection. This shows us that when Paul alludes to Christ as the first fruit, he is saying the harvest had begun. Now, folks, those who deny a transitional period of time, a process of development, an initiation awaiting consummation, must deal with the fact Christ was the first fruit. Then Paul says, afterward, after what? After Christ. Those who are Christ at his coming. Every man in his first, or in his own order. Now watch this. Christ is the first fruit. Afterward, every man in his first, or in his own order. The Greek word order there is the Greek word tagma. And it means order of sequence. Christ is the first. Afterward, every man in his own order. Christ initiated the resurrection harvest. Now somebody's going to jump up, obviously, and say, well, that means has to be a physical resurrection. No, that completely misses the point of Christ being the first one raised from the dead. We'll have more to say about that in our next segment. The point here is to see that Paul's doctrine is based upon, number one, the Jewish calendar. Number two, the fact that Christ was the firstborn of the resurrection process. The already, but the not yet. That will lead us to John 5, 24 to 29. We'll talk about that in our next installment. In the meantime, just grasp the concept that the fact of Christ being the first born from the dead, the first fruit of the harvest, demands a process of resurrection that had already begun and was awaiting imminent consummation. Be looking forward to that. And by the way, don't forget, you can order your copy of the Greg Preston DVDs or MP3s. I've sent the masters off for processing. They should be back to me very, very soon. In the meantime, go to my website, donkpreston.com or BibleProphecy.com. Follow the instructions there in the announcement and make your order as soon as possible. The special offer will not last long. You want to take advantage of it. Order your copy of the Steve Gregg Don Preston debate that just finished in Denver, Colorado, September 6th through 8th. Fantastic discussions. You've got to have your copy of these DVDs and MP3s. So once again, go to donkpreston.com, go to BibleProphecy.com, follow the instructions, send me your order, and just as soon as I get the masters back, I will send you your copy at a special discount rate. So again, thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Boy, it's great to feel good again. We'll see you on the flip side.